These are the top oversellers
Survivor Series
in WWE history.
And the Nature Boy caught in the temple.
Number 20, Austin Theory.
to the moniker of Fight Owens. Stunner to Theory.
Young, brash, and cocky, Austin Theory has the makings of a star in the business, especially because he carries himself with an air of confidence that you don't often see in this industry.
Let me talk to you.
However, while he may be one of the young up-and-comer superstars in the WWE, he's already cemented himself as one of the best at selling moves in the business, even though he's still in the early stages of his career.
And there goes
Theory isn't only strong, but is also incredibly athletic. He's shown us his athleticism multiple times in his oversells, especially when he's up against a wrestler who uses the stunner or a variation of this move. He combines different ways of selling the stunner, paying homage to the way that Scott Hall and The Rock oversell the move. Of course, he's oversold a lot of other moves throughout his career already. And at this point in his career, Theory has the makings of a future world champion, and there's a good chance that he's going to be a better performer in years to come, especially with the way that he sells moves. He's likely going to go down as one of the best oversellers in the history of the industry when it's all said and done. Number 19, Kevin Nash. He may stand nearly 7 feet tall of pure muscle, but Kevin Nash was one of the wrestlers who knew how to sell moves despite his awesome size.
this guy.
There aren't a lot of wrestlers who can actually do what he does at his incredible height and physique. But his best oversells happened during his run with WCW when he was a member of the New World Order, or NWO. And with the NWO, he had a famous segment called the Finger Poke of Doom. He had a match with fellow NWO star Hulk Hogan. What happened was that Hogan simply poked Nash in the chest with a finger, causing Nash to suddenly fall on the mat like he got hit by a battering ram, allowing Hogan to pin him. Of course, there's a reason why Nash jobbed to Hogan in that match, and it was more of the NWO making a statement. But the fact is that the Finger Poke of Doom is often called the start of the end of the WCW, as we all know how this company started losing money and ratings to WWE before getting bought out in the early 2000s. Number 18, JTG. Truth be told, JTG isn't the first wrestler you would remember for being an overseller. But the guy was a low-tier worker who actually did his job well enough to entertain people, especially during his run with Crime Time. Of course, he tried to distinguish himself in a no-bearing match against Santino Marella, one of the funniest characters in the business. We all know Santino uses the Cobra finisher, which involves him wearing a Cobra stocking and striking his opponent with a thrust. In his match with JTG, Santino struck the Cobra dead on. But instead of JTG just going down on the mat, he started convulsing as soon as he got struck by the Cobra. As the announcer noticed and said it was because of the venom. JTG went down to the mat after convulsing, allowing Santino to pick up the victory. This oversell by JTG made the Cobra look like a legit move. It was the right way to sell it, as such a silly move deserved an equally silly way of selling it. It was puzzling as to why it took a long time for a wrestler to think that this was the best way of selling the Cobra. But it turned out that the top brass wasn't happy with the way that JTG sold the move. His career went through a downward spiral after that as WWE eventually released him and the rest of Crime Time, probably because he oversold a move that should have always been sold that way from the start. Number 17, Billy Gunn. Billy Gunn was famous for his work as a member of the Generation X and as one half of its subgroup, the New Age Outlaws. He's worked in a lot of different promotions after his run with WWE, but he's mostly remembered for his work with the wrestling giant during his prime years as a member of DX. But the one thing that made him stand out the most was his ability to oversell moves and make them look impactful. Gunn stands 6'5" and has a chiseled physique. A man that big shouldn't be able to oversell moves like he does. He often twisted and turned whenever he got hit by a powerful move. At times, he sold moves so well that they were borderline silly and comedic. Of course, he had a unique way of selling the stunner by basically kneeling on the mat before knocking himself on his back. Gunn was an artist as a seller, and it made sense because he and the New Age Outlaws were kind of silly as well. But what made Gunn stand out was the fact that this man was such an athletic marvel that he made selling an art form for a long time in his career. He knew how to work with wrestlers, often making their moves look great by flipping in the air and doing some ridiculous stuff to make the match much more entertaining. Gunn, of course, is still wrestling in his 60s, and that's because he took good care of his body and still looks great as heck. Unfortunately, he doesn't sell moves as well as he does right now compared to when he was still young and athletic. Number 16, Spike Dudley. As the third member of the Dudley Boys, Spike Dudley was the outlier of one of the most accomplished tag teams in wrestling history. He was much smaller than the other Dudleys. On top of that, he didn't have the talent that his kayfabe brothers had. But what he did have was the ability to take bumps and make them so much more painful. Spike lived to take bumps in the worst way possible, and WWE turned him into a human punching bag throughout his career by making him go through the worst possible bumps imaginable. He got thrown through tables, smacked with trash bins and chairs, and launched halfway through the ring. A man of his size was made to be a human ragdoll, but he took every bump like a champ. But what made Spike an amazing seller was his ability to make every bump look so much more painful. It helps that he was 5'8" and 150 pounds, allowing him to make power moves and other bumps look devastating. But his toughness was always the reason why he was able to sell bumps that may have easily injured other wrestlers. He took every bump solidly and still came out of the arena in one piece. Spike Dudley's ability to oversell a bump is the reason why he's still standing today. Sure, a lot of the things that the other wrestlers did to him looked incredibly painful, but it was more of a product of Dudley overselling the move more than anything else that allowed those bumps to look legit. He's a tough son of a gun, and we tip our hats off to him for entertaining us with some of the worst bumps imaginable. Number 15, Rick Rude. Only the true OGs remember Rick Rude. He wasn't just a ravishing face with great muscles and was also a great in-ring performer who stood out for his body of work inside the squared circle. But while he never received a world title reign or an elite push throughout his career, he always knew how to connect with the audience. The best way he did so was to oversell moves. Rick Rude was a hard worker who made selling moves one of his best assets. Back then, WWE was pushing some of Rude's peers to the spotlight regardless of whether or not they were talented. One case in point was the Ultimate Warrior, who was more of an energy guy than an actual wrestler. The Warrior had his fair share of limitations, but Rick Rude made sure to make his opponent look great. In one of their matches, the Ultimate Warrior benefited from Rude's outstanding ability to sell moves. He worked around Warrior's limitations and sold his moves to perfection. We all know that the Ultimate Warrior doesn't have the greatest arsenal of moves, but Rick Rude made them all impactful. It was one of the best things about Rick Rude. He wasn't going to be the top guy in the company, but he made sure to make the top guys look a lot better, regardless of their talent level. Rude was the consummate professional inside the ring, and his ability to oversell moves was one of the reasons why he was often placed in matches with up-and-coming wrestlers. Number 14, Rob Van Dam. Rob Van Dam may be a relic of ECW for a lot of people, but he's one of the few ECW talents who made it big in the WWE and got a world title push. He's got the looks, talent, size, and athleticism, but it was his body of work that eventually allowed him to become one of the best oversellers in the WWE. One of the things that fans would remember about RVD is his 5-star frog splash. It's basically a standard frog splash on steroids because he jumps so high and spreads his limbs out to make sure that he makes full contact with his torso. The thing about this move is that after delivering it, he immediately clutches his ribs in pain as if he hurt himself in the process as well. This has always been the case as he goes for his ribs first before pinning his opponent. The way that he sells his own move is one of the reasons why he is such a great overseller. He makes people see how painful his finisher is so that it would look convincing that he's sacrificing his body to hit an impactful move. But if the 5-star frog splash actually did a lot of damage to him, he wouldn't be using it and should have retired a long time ago. But RVD is still wrestling and has been using his finisher for decades. Of course, he also knows how to sell opposing moves. RVD uses his athleticism to good use when selling moves like the DDT, understanding that the best way to make a match entertaining is to make it look convincing to the audience. And we love him for that. Number 12, Ric Flair. He may be called the dirtiest player in the game, but Ric Flair is also one of the best oversellers. Flair holds the record for the most world title reigns in professional wrestling history, tied with John Cena in that regard. That's why he's one of the greatest wrestlers in professional wrestling history, and his understanding of how to sell a move is one of the things that make him great. Called the Flair Flop, Flair is a maestro at making a move more painful than it actually is. He is best known for suddenly dropping down on the mat like a log after taking an impactful hit from his opponent. It makes him look like a comedic character who thought that he could take a hit, but suddenly realized that the attack did more damage than anticipated. That's why he's a great showman. He's got plenty of variations of that oversell, including going over the top rope to the outside of the ring and strutting back before falling flat on the floor. Flair also oversells verbally as well, especially when he got older. He's got a great way of making moves look painful, especially to his lower back during the final years of his WWE career. Of course, the fact that Flair makes every wrestling move look so painful is one of the reasons why he could put up 5-star matches on a daily basis. He understood that professional wrestling is a show and that he needed to make matches more entertaining with his overselling. He's not the most athletic wrestler of all time, but his gimmicks and verbal way of selling moves made him a true entertainer. Number 11, Mick Foley. You'd have to be great at selling moves if you're one of the best in the business at taking bumps. Mick Foley, who went by 3 different personas, such as Dude Love, Cactus Jack, and Mankind, is arguably the best in the business at taking the worst bumps imaginable. He made sure to sell those bumps like a champ by making them look as painful as possible. Of course, we've seen Foley getting tossed by The Undertaker from the top of Hell in a Cell, and he's been able to survive similar bumps in the past. Nevertheless, he almost always gets up just as strong as ever, regardless of how painful those bumps can be. His secret is that, on top of the fact that he's just a tough man, he's great at making bumps look more painful than they actually are. But one of the things that made Foley one of the greatest sellers in wrestling history is the fact that he knows how to sell verbally and physically without flopping around the ring so much. One of the best ways of selling was rocking back and forth while muttering to himself and tearing out his hair after taking a hard bump. He also screamed in absolute pain, and the way that he screeched was horrifying. The way that he sold his bumps is one of the reasons why he will forever be the greatest hardcore legend in the industry. Unfortunately, he took one too many bumps in his career, leading to neurological, skeletal, and muscular damages that eventually forced him to hang his boots early. Number 10, Heath Slater. Heath Slater was never going to be a main event player in WWE, but he made the most out of what was given to him. He always made sure to make his segments and storylines entertaining because he was such a good sport, especially when it came to some of the silliest things to ever happen on Raw. But it was also his amazing overselling that got him over with fans. During a certain part of his career, Slater became a comedic wrestler when he challenged WWE legends to matches only for them to lay him out quickly. Using his talent for showmanship and athleticism, Slater made old and washed-out wrestlers look great by overselling their moves and making it seem like they still got it. Such wrestlers included Vader, Rikishi, Bob Backlund, and even Lita. He somehow managed to make those legends look legit because of how well he oversold their moves. Of course, one of the reasons why Slater was so great at overselling was the fact that he dedicated himself to his segments and storylines, making sure that the crowd was entertained. He knew that he was never going to have a big run in the company, and that's why he ensured to succeed in every opportunity presented to him by the company. He was dedicated to his craft, regardless of whether or not he was important to the business, as one of the lower-tier wrestlers during the 2010. Number 9, Rey Mysterio. Rey Mysterio is one of the greatest legends in the history of the business, as he has succeeded in every opportunity presented to him despite being one of the smallest competitors in WWE. He's always been an underdog facing competitors much bigger than him. But one of the reasons why he has become so successful at being the ultimate underdog is the fact that he's so great at selling. Well, it's easier to sell moves when you're 5'6", going up against 200-pound 6-footers. Mysterio made selling an art form by allowing opponents so much bigger than him to basically ragdoll him throughout entire matches. In such a way, he was not only making his opponents look strong, but also making himself look smaller, allowing fans to sympathize with him as an underdog. Mysterio allows bigger opponents to easily manhandle him in the ring. When he takes bumps, he makes them look so impactful by screaming and wincing in pain. Of course, he already knows that he's much smaller than his opponents, and that's why he doesn't lose anything when allowing them to look a lot bigger and stronger than they actually are. But the fact that he oversells moves is the reason why fans love him. He may look like a child against most of his opponents, but he has proven time and time again that he has what it takes to beat some of the best in the industry. That's heart right there, and Rey Mysterio overselling moves is the epitome of resilience. Number 8, Scott Hall. The true mark of a great overseller can be seen in how well they sell the Stone Cold Stunner, which is arguably the most iconic finishing move in wrestling history. Hall made his name in WWE during the 90s before moving to WCW, where he became one of the most iconic wrestlers in the now defunct company. But when WWE bought WCW in the early 2000s, Hall and some of the other superstars entered into feuds with WWE wrestlers. One such wrestler that Scott Hall had a feud with was none other than Stone Cold Steve Austin. They were on a collision course at WrestleMania 18, and Hall became the target of multiple stunners leading up to that match. He sold those stunners beautifully, making sure that he was actually stunned by that move. But the crowning moment for the oversell came during their WrestleMania 18 match. Austin went for a stunner, and Hall just stood there, stunned after taking the first one. Stone Cold went for a second stunner. This time, Hall jumped backward and was several feet in the air before landing on his back. The way that Hall sold the stunner was unlike any other wrestler because he didn't do it in a way that was exaggerated. He didn't flop on the floor, looking a lot like a fish out of water. Instead, he just made it look like a legit move that stunned its victims. Number 7, Curt Hennig. Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig, was one of the greatest performers of his time, and was not only one of the best to ever do it on the mat, but was one of the best showmen in history. Everything he did looked perfect, as Bret Hart praised the way that Hennig sold for his opponents, especially when he was facing wrestlers with limited talents. In a match with Hulk Hogan, Hennig oversold a simple head bump into the turnbuckle by jumping in the air as if he got shot by a cannon. Then, in a match with Hart in SummerSlam 1991, Mr. Perfect put Bret over in a big way in New York, despite suffering from a back injury. He sold all of Hart's moves perfectly. Of course, there were times when his overselling cost him. In a match against He Who Must Not Be Named, Hennig oversold a simple chop outside the ring by jumping backward into the floor. But instead of landing cleanly, he hit the back of his head on the steel steps. So, in a way, he did a bit too much when selling moves, often getting hurt in the process of doing so. However, Curt Hennig's selling was one of the inspirations for many modern-day superstars, including Dolph Ziggler, who modeled his overselling after Mr. Perfect's way of selling moves. Even though his career didn't end as well as it should have, Hennig always did his best to thump around the ring to make sure that his opponents looked better than they actually were, leading to great matches and entertaining shows. Number 6, Triple H. Throughout a good part of his career, Triple H was more of a serious superstar instead of a comedic and wacky one. He understood the concept of entertaining fans. He was the consummate professional who made sure to sell moves the right way. But like a lot of superstars, Hunter also had his fair share of overselling moves. He was one of the superstars who were great at selling the stunner, having been on the bad end of this move multiple times during the Attitude Era. Triple H not only sold the stunner with his patented water shower, but he also strutted around the ring before putting himself in position for another Stone Cold Stunner. But Triple H's most infamous oversell happened in a match against Randy Orton, when he was teaming up with fellow Evolution member Ric Flair. Hunter had one of the most ridiculous oversells when he came down from the top rope to meet Orton's foot. As soon as his face made contact with Orton's foot, Triple H just stood there, stunned, as he looked like he was about to fall on the floor, while Randy was still lying on the mat. Shawn, over at the corner, was making hand gestures, guessing how Triple H was going to fall on the floor. But Hunter just stood there, stunned and loopy for several more seconds, before eventually falling on the floor in what is known as one of the silliest oversells of the 2000s. Number 5. Batista. You probably don't see Batista as a seller, especially because he's a huge man with muscles in places you didn't even know muscles could exist. But one of the things that Batista did was make his opponents look good. A man of his size and power shouldn't even be a great worker inside the ring. But Dave did things exceptionally well, especially when selling his opponent's moves. However, there were times when he went overboard with his selling, making the entire scene odd and weird because someone his size shouldn't be flopping around the ring. In one instance, he oversold a simple push by Mark Henry by launching himself halfway through the ring, making it seem like Henry was fat strong. The entire scene looked awkward because Batista himself is a big guy. While Mark Henry is bigger, we all know that it's not easy to push someone Batista's size. But at the same time, Henry was also at fault in that scene because we all know that he should have put more power behind that attack to make the move look more legitimate. So, in Batista's defense, he may have oversold that move, but he did it in a way that fits the scenario. He needed to make the scene convincing, and launching himself across the ring was the only way he could make it look legit. Number 4. Randy Orton. As a third-generation wrestler, Randy Orton understands what it takes to be in the business and what he needs to do to become one of the best performers in the industry. He's been in wrestling for more than 2 decades and has been one of the most consistent performers in WWE throughout his entire career. One of the reasons why he's been so successful is the fact that he knows how to sell moves. Orton knows how to make a move look legit, especially when it comes to finishers. He has his own way of selling the stunner, rolling back across the ring after eating the move. He's also made the Big Show's knockout punch look legit by actually looking like he got his lights knocked out. In a sense, he's the consummate professional, as he knows what he has to do to make matches better and more interesting. Randy Orton's ability to sell moves is one of the reasons why he's been one of the best in the industry. He doesn't sell moves in an exaggerated way, but understands what needs to be done to make the move convincing. A simple super kick makes it look like he got hit on the head with a baseball bat. He's also done well at selling for Rey Mysterio to make the smaller man's moves look much more impactful. In a sense, Orton's ability to sell is one of the reasons why he's put up great matches throughout his career, as not a lot of people make opposing moves look great without having to do too much. It's the perfect blend of exaggerating and acting. Number 3. Dolph Ziggler. He doesn't always get his flowers for being one of the most consistent performers on the roster throughout his run with WWE, but Dolph Ziggler is one of the superstars who always made sure to make his opponents look better through the art of selling. He's arguably the best at overselling moves in the modern age, and he's done such a fantastic job at making his opponents look better than they are. Whether it's something as simple as a knee to the head or a power move like a spear, Ziggler makes moves look impactful. He has the rare ability to make a move look like it legitimately hurt him, and there aren't a lot of guys who are willing to work hard the way that he does when he's out there putting 100% into the art of selling. One of the things that makes Dolph Ziggler a special seller is the fact that he doesn't always exaggerate the move. A flip in the middle of the air, or even something as simple as rocking his head back and forth, is already enough to make a sell look great when Ziggler's the one doing it. The best part is that he's jobbed to younger wrestlers throughout his career and has done a great job at getting them over by overselling their moves. He's a true professional in every sense of the word. Ziggler drew inspiration from none other than Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig, when it came to selling moves. But the difference between him and Hennig is that he doesn't over-exaggerate his sells. Instead, he just makes them entertaining, impactful, and convincing. This is why Ziggler has always been one of the best in-ring competitors in the industry, even though he isn't necessarily a main event player. Number 2, The Rock. There's a good reason why The Rock is one of the greatest to ever get inside the ring. He's not only one of the greatest talkers in the business, but is also one of the most entertaining performers ever seen. His combination of genetics, athleticism, and acting made him one of the best at selling moves. He's done it consistently throughout his career, regardless of who his opponent was. The Rock is probably the best at selling the Stone Cold Stunner. Fun fact, The Rock oversold the Stunner because he and Steve Austin had a backstage agreement that Stone Cold would buy him beers if he sold the Stunner the best way possible. Because of that, The Rock turned selling the Stunner into an art form, flopping halfway across the ring in a way that only he can. But he's also made other moves look so much more impactful. No other wrestler sells the spear quite like The Rock. While most superstars would rather lie down on the floor after eating a spear, The Rock winces in pain, making it look like he just got hit by a Mack truck. He's done this multiple times, the latest of which happened in WrestleMania 40 when he got accidentally speared by Roman Reigns. At more than 50 years old, he still sold the spear like a champ. Of course, The Rock is one of the most prominent actors in the business, and that's why he's great at overselling moves. He knows that wrestling is, first and foremost, an entertainment industry, which is why he loves taking the entertainment factor to the next level, especially when he's the one on the receiving end of moves. Number 1, Shawn Michaels. Often considered the greatest in-ring performer in the industry, Shawn Michaels mastered the art of selling and is one of the best at making it look like he's taken a beating inside the ring. He's taken in-ring acting to the next level by making it look like he's down to his last drop of stamina in a lot of instances. Michaels has been in plenty of matches wherein he looks like he doesn't know where he is, but still has enough stamina to pull off a miraculous move out of nowhere. Something as simple as that is one of the reasons why his matches look so convincing. But he's also notorious for making moves look so much more impactful than they actually are. Michaels has done this multiple times throughout his career, especially when he was up against bigger opponents. But the most infamous oversell occurred in a match against Hulk Hogan when he took things too far by exaggerating the Hulkster's moves to a point that was beyond convincing. Michaels was reportedly salty about the fact that Hogan didn't want the rivalry to become a 3-part series wherein Hogan would win twice. Instead, the Hulkster wanted it to be a one-match rivalry with him winning it. Because Michaels wasn't happy about that, he made the match memorable by overselling Hogan's moves. Of course, at the time, the Hulkster was already old. So the fact that Michaels was overselling simple punches and kicks by flopping around the ring made it seem like he was doing it on purpose to make Hogan look bad. This is why he's put up a ton of memorable matches throughout his legendary career. Speaking of memorable, check out some of the wildest moments in WWE history.